Hey everybody, Mark Dawes here, and I have another interesting question that I've just been asked, and that is, do I have any recommendations for eye protection to be used during restraint holds? And the reason is this is the reason behind it. It says, we have a service user who is trying to severely injure staff by attempting to gouge at staff's eyes. So we are currently looking for options to protect our staff which are in line with equipment intended safe for use. Now I'm going to read you what I've actually written here because I've responded to them and I want to get this right. So forgive me if I don't look directly at you, I'm going to look at the screen. Well, firstly, the company obviously has a duty of care to its staff under health and safety legislation, which is qualified by the words reasonably practicable, which basically means risk versus cost. So if the risk is low and the cost of any safeguard or control measure or equipment is much higher, then it would not, generally speaking, be reasonably practical to provide those sort of control measures. However, if the risk is high and the cost is much lower, then it would be reasonably practical to put the safeguards and the control measures in place. So let's now look at costs. So what would be the cost to an employer if a member of staff lost their vision in one eye due to them being gouged by a service user and then they claim for compensation or sued? Well, as we can see from this website here, this is Right Hassle. They are a firm of solicitors. They have a guideline list of actually compensation awards that you can get here. It's only a guide, there's a sliding scale, and you can see there for total blindness someone can claim up to £217,200. For a minor eye injury it ranges from £3,100 to £7,000, and there's a varying scale in between. This is another case from the solicitors Irwin Mitchell, where a man received £50,000 compensation following a serious eye injury at work. So the costs are quite substantial. You're looking, from £3,000 upwards into the hundreds of thousands of pounds. So this is quite, a substantial cost. Now let's look at something else here, because the second thing to bear in mind is that if this has already happened, is happening, and is likely to happen again, then that is deemed a foreseeable event, so you have to plan for that. So you have to have what's now deemed a planned intervention strategy. And this means that risk assessment should be done for the intervention, which is deemed hazardous, which obviously this type of incident is. This also means that the planning and control of such interventions would require not only suitably trained and appropriate numbers of staff, but also the required personal protective equipment, which could be used to prevent the foreseeable risk of a member of staff getting their eyes gouged. Now, one of the most common things that I hear companies wanting to look at when they actually raise these issues are goggles. So they want to get staff to wear goggles. Now that's fine, but there is a weak link in that, and the weak link in that control measure is that if the service user's hands are free and they're not quickly and effectively controlled, or if the service user manages to break free from a hold, then the goggles can be displaced, knocked off and fall off, leaving the member of staff vulnerable to their eyes being gouged once more. Now this is a foreseeable problem with prolonged manual interventions, because in those situations staff become fatigued, sweat builds up, holes can slip, and therefore the margin for error is increased. Shields is another thing I also hear people talk about, that they might consider those as a control option, and they're very effective at protecting staff. But to a distressed service user, maybe a very vulnerable service user, shields can look very intimidating and menacing and escalate a situation instead of de-escalating one. In addition, at some stage, there will need to be a gap in the shields where staff can actually grab hold of that service user and use manual control to actually restrain that service user. So we're then back at the root cause of the problem. Handcuffs is another option I hear people talk about, mechanical restraints. And now, mechanical restraints can be applied quickly and effectively by trained staff, and they have the benefit of reducing the risk of a prolonged intervention whilst also reducing the risk of the restrained person being able to use their hands to gouge at staff's eyes. Now, I know some organisations don't like them, they don't even like the words mechanical restraint because they don't seem consistent with a caring environment. But that is generally an emotionally driven opinion and not an objective one that we need to control risk, which should be in line with the risk assessment. Emergency response, soft cuffs. These are another option. They're great. More commonly we call them soft cuffs, and these are great. And although they provide the same degree of control and immobilization as handcuffs, they look less intrusive and would satisfy those who would prefer a softer option to the traditional mechanical cuffs. However, even with both hands controlled, the service user still has arm movement, so there is still a potential risk of them being able to gouge a staff's eyes if the staff's awareness or attention level drops or if they are distracted. A better piece of equipment, in my humble opinion, is the safe holding system. It is basically a belt with soft cuffs attached, and this controls arm movement and the hand, so the risk is virtually eliminated at source. It is also a much less intrusive option than manual prolonged restraint, and the belt has also been medically reviewed and industry tested, so it is fit for its intended purpose. In many cases, according to Doug Mealy, who supplies the equipment, with the correct approach, the safe holding system can be applied with the consent and acceptance of the patient in the same way that a patient would consent to using a hoist. And Doug is happy to supply you with case study examples if you wish to contact him. And as a reasonably practical option, the cost of a safe holding system and the minimal training needed would be massively less than the cost of compensation should a member of staff sue their employer because of damage to their eyes. Well, I hope that helps. I'll leave some contact details for Doug beneath. Please feel free to comment on this video and add any value to it for those who may actually, benefit from your knowledge and your wisdom. If you like what you hear, like it, feel free to share it, and thanks ever so much for listening once again. Speak to you all soon.